Why was she the only one no one acknowledged at the table? That question lingered in the room like smoke, though no one dared speak it aloud. She sat at the far end, posture steady, eyes forward, listening. Her face gave nothing away, but inside every word scraped. The colonel's tone was iron. 0300 departure. Ground Assault Team Alpha moves first. Sniper coverage minimal. Support will be adjusted. The men nodded, some smirked. A few tapped pens against notepads with false confidence, but no one turned toward her, not one set of eyes. It was always like this. She had fought her way through every gate, every wall, every unspoken rule designed to keep her out. And still, even here on the brink of the mission, she might as well have been invisible. She pressed her thumb against the edge of her folder, letting the sharp corner bite her skin. A tiny anchor, a reminder not to speak too soon, because once she did, there would be no going back. The storm outside rattled the tin of the hangar. Rain pelted the roof in scattered bursts, a rhythm against silence. The air smelled like sweat and oil, stale coffee and damp uniforms. 1,000 tiny details that told her what this was, men preparing for war. But she wasn't here for war. She was here for something else. The silver chain at her neck shifted as she breathed. Her brother's tag, heavy despite its size. His blood had touched it last. His body hadn't made it home. She remembered his words like they were whispered yesterday. Don't try to prove anything, Anna, just live. But what did he know? He hadn't lived. He'd gone silent in a foreign field, his name reduced to a report, a folded flag. She clenched the tag beneath her collar. No, she wasn't here to live. She was here because he didn't. The colonel's voice snapped her back. Any questions? Chairs creaked, boots shuffled. A cough broke the quiet, no one spoke. The plan was sealed, unquestioned, as if carved in stone. She looked down at her notes. She had seen what they hadn't. Details buried in satellite feeds, shadows that weren't supposed to move, heat signatures that didn't belong. She knew the plan was wrong. If they went as ordered, Alpha wouldn't come back. Not all of them. Maybe none of them. Her jaw tightened. Her tongue pressed against her teeth. Say it, she thought, just say it. But she didn't, not yet. Because once she opened her mouth, she'd stop being invisible, and then they would turn. She remembered her first deployment. The stares, the quiet laughter, the whispered bets about how long she'd last. She had lasted longer than most, but respect never came. Only silence, broken by orders, barked past her as if she were an object, not a soldier. A pen clicked, a chair scraped. The colonel dismissed them with a wave of his hand. The men rose, voices low, swapping grim jokes, adjusting gear straps. Boots echoed on concrete. They didn't look at her as they passed. She stayed seated, staring at the map left on the table. Red lines cut across the landscape, circles around objectives, arrows pointing toward danger, and beneath it all mistakes clear as day to her, invisible to them. She exhaled, slow. The storm rattled the roof again. A drop of water landed on the table from some unseen leak above, spreading across the map like blood. She whispered, barely audible, "You'd hate this, wouldn't you?" Her brother's voice in memory was a half smile, half warning. "You don't win by shouting, Anna. You win by outlasting." She closed her eyes. Outlasting wasn't enough anymore. She rose from the chair. The map folded under her hand. She walked toward the colonel's office. Each step echoed against concrete, a hollow drumbeat. Her fist hovered over the door before knocking. 2 raps firm. Enter. The colonel sat behind his desk, paperwork scattered, lamp casting long shadows. His expression didn't change when he saw her, just a flick of his eyes. "Sir," she placed the folder on his desk, sliding it forward. "Satellite confirms enemy presence in the ridge. Thermal scans picked up movement here." Her finger tapped the corner of the map. "That's an ambush site. If Alpha moves as briefed, they'll walk straight into it." His gaze lifted hard. "We've confirmed nothing. Intel's thin, we move as planned. Her throat tightened, she swallowed. With respect, sir, Intel isn't thin, it's ignored. The silence stretched. His jaw shifted once, then stilled. You think you see something everyone else does. She didn't flinch. I don't think I know. A long pause, then his voice quiet, that'll be all. Dismissed, as if she hadn't spoken at all. She stood rigid, her nails bit into her palms. She wanted to slam the map down to force him to look, to listen, but she didn't. Instead, she left. The hangar air hit her again, colder now, harsher. Men strapped gear, checked weapons, tightened boots. Jokes cracked sharp through tension. None of them knew what waited. Her gaze swept the room. Faces she knew but didn't. Men with families, kids' drawings folded in pockets, prayers stitched into silence. And they were walking toward death without even knowing it. Her stomach twisted. She turned, walked past them, out into the storm. Rain struck her face, ran down her collar. The world outside smelled of wet dirt, ozone, steel. She drew in the air like she was drowning. Lightning flashed, splitting the night. For a moment the base lit up in stark white. Her reflection glimmered in a puddle, warped, unrecognizable. She pressed the tag at her neck again. "What would you do?" she whispered. Her brother's voice, imagined, came back quiet. "Sometimes you don't ask, you act." She looked back at the hangar, at the men laughing, blind to what lay ahead, at the colonel's shadow moving across the window, at the mission she wasn't meant to change. She exhaled, rain streamed off her cap. And she decided. Tomorrow they would believe he wouldn't move. They would believe the colonel's word was law. But when the time came, it wouldn't be his authority that saved them. It would be hers. Why was she the only one no one acknowledged at the table? That question lingered in the room like smoke, though no one dared speak it aloud. She sat at the far end, posture steady, eyes forward, listening. Her face gave nothing away, but inside every word scraped. The colonel's tone was iron. 0300 departure. Ground Assault Team Alpha moves first. Sniper coverage minimal. Support will be adjusted. The men nodded, some smirked. A few tapped pens against notepads with false confidence, but no one turned toward her, not one set of eyes. It was always like this. She had fought her way through every gate, every wall, every unspoken rule designed to keep her out. And still, even here on the brink of the mission, she might as well have been invisible. She pressed her thumb against the edge of her folder, letting the sharp corner bite her skin. A tiny anchor, a reminder not to speak too soon, because once she did, there would be no going back. The storm outside rattled the tin of the hangar. Rain pelted the roof in scattered bursts, a rhythm against silence. The air smelled like sweat and oil, stale coffee and damp uniforms. 1,000 tiny details that told her what this was, men preparing for war. But she wasn't here for war. She was here for something else. The silver chain at her neck shifted as she breathed. Her brother's tag, heavy despite its size. His blood had touched it last. His body hadn't made it home. She remembered his words like they were whispered yesterday. Don't try to prove anything, Anna, just live. But what did he know? He hadn't lived. He'd gone silent in a foreign field, his name reduced to a report, a folded flag. She clenched the tag beneath her collar. No, she wasn't here to live. She was here because he didn't. The colonel's voice snapped her back. Any questions? Chairs creaked, boots shuffled. A cough broke the quiet, no one spoke. The plan was sealed, unquestioned, as if carved in stone. She looked down at her notes. She had seen what they hadn't. Details buried in satellite feeds, shadows that weren't supposed to move, heat signatures that didn't belong. She knew the plan was wrong. If they went as ordered, Alpha wouldn't come back. Not all of them. Maybe none of them. Her jaw tightened. Her tongue pressed against her teeth. Say it, she thought, just say it. But she didn't, not yet. Because once she opened her mouth, she'd stop being invisible. And then they would turn. She remembered her first deployment. The stares, the quiet laughter, the whispered bets about how long she'd last. She had lasted longer than most. But respect never came. Only silence, broken by orders barked past her as if she were an object, not a soldier. A pen clicked, a chair scraped. The colonel dismissed them with a wave of his hand. The men rose, voices low, swapping grim jokes, adjusting gear straps. Boots echoed on concrete. They didn't look at her as they passed. She stayed seated, staring at the map left on the table. Red lines cut across the landscape, circles around objectives, arrows pointing toward danger, and beneath it all mistakes clear as day to her, invisible to them. She exhaled slow. The storm rattled the roof again. A drop of water landed on the table from some unseen leak above, spreading across the map like blood. She whispered, barely audible, "You'd hate this, wouldn't you?" Her brother's voice in memory was a half smile, half warning. "You don't win by shouting, Anna. You win by outlasting." She closed her eyes. Outlasting wasn't enough anymore. She rose from the chair. The map folded under her hand. She walked toward the colonel's office. Each step echoed against concrete, a hollow drumbeat. Her fist hovered over the door before knocking. 2 raps firm. "Enter." The colonel sat behind his desk, paperwork scattered, lamp casting long shadows. His expression didn't change when he saw her, just a flick of his eyes. "Sir," she placed the folder on his desk, sliding it forward. "Satellite confirms enemy presence in the ridge. Thermal scans picked up movement here." Her finger tapped the corner of the map. "That's an ambush site. If Alpha moves as briefed, they'll walk straight into it." His gaze lifted hard. "We've confirmed nothing. Intel's thin, we move as planned." Her throat tightened, she swallowed. "With respect, sir, intel isn't thin, it's ignored." The silence stretched. His jaw shifted once, then stilled. "You think you see something everyone else does." She didn't flinch. "I don't think I know." A long pause, then his voice quiet. "That'll be all." Dismissed, as if she hadn't spoken at all. She stood rigid. Her nails bit into her palms. She wanted to slam the map down, to force him to look, to listen. But she didn't. Instead, she left. The hangar air hit her again, colder now, harsher. Men strapped gear, checked weapons, tightened boots. Jokes cracked sharp through tension. None of them knew what waited. Her gaze swept the room. Faces she knew but didn't. Men with families, kids' drawings folded in pockets, prayers stitched into silence. And they were walking toward death without even knowing it. Her stomach twisted. She turned, walked past them, out into the storm. Rain struck her face, ran down her collar. The world outside smelled of wet dirt, ozone, steel. She drew in the air like she was drowning. Lightning flashed, splitting the night. For a moment the base lit up in stark white. Her reflection glimmered in a puddle, warped, unrecognizable. She pressed the tag at her neck again. "What would you do?" she whispered. Her brother's voice, imagined, came back quiet. "Sometimes you don't ask, you act." She looked back at the hangar, at the men laughing, blind to what lay ahead, at the colonel's shadow moving across the window, at the mission she wasn't meant to change. Her eyes stung, not from rain. She blinked hard, clearing the blur. Inside the hangar, 2 soldiers stood by the ammo crates. She caught their conversation, muffled by rain but clear enough in pieces. One said, "You hear about him. Johnson left 2 kids back home." The other snorted, "We all left someone." Their laughter was brittle, sharp, not joy but fear disguised. She froze in place, listening. Johnson. She'd trained with him once. He had been kind in the smallest of ways, passing water when no one else noticed, a quiet nod in a hallway when everyone else looked away. He had a scar along his jawline, a story he never told. And he'd be the first through the ridge, the first into the kill zone. She turned away before her face betrayed her. Her barracks were quiet when she entered. The smell of damp gear filled the small space. mixed with the faint sweetness of someone's forgotten cologne. She sat on her bunk, elbows on knees, hands pressed together. Her mind reeled. Do nothing and men died. Speak again and she'd be shut down, or worse, marked as reckless, insubordinate. Her career would vanish under the weight of their disbelief. But this wasn't about career, not anymore. Her fingers tightened around the tag again, edges cutting into skin. She thought of the folded flag in her mother's hands, the silence that filled their house after his death, the way she had sworn, quietly, to herself, that she'd carry him with her until something changed. This was the moment. Change wasn't asked for, it was forced. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the paint. Her heartbeat slowed, steady. Tomorrow, they'd believe he wouldn't move. They'd believe the colonel's word was final. But when the ridge came into sight, when the trap unfolded, it wouldn't be his authority that broke the silence. It would be hers. And when she acted, they'd have no choice but to follow. Why was she awake when everyone else slept? The barracks were silent. Rows of bunks stretched in the dark, shadows folding over restless bodies. Some men muttered in their dreams, some breathed heavy, one snored faintly in the far corner. But she sat upright, boots on the floor, eyes tracing the thin line of moonlight sneaking through the high window. Sleep wouldn't come, not with the ridge in her head. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it, men walking into a hollow valley, silhouettes on high ground waiting for them, rifles angled down. She could almost hear it, the sharp crack of gunfire, the cries cut short, boots slipping in dirt that turned to mud. She pressed her palms against her eyes, hard enough to see stars. She had been trained to trust orders, to move as commanded, to fall in line. But training didn't erase instinct, and her instinct screamed. A whisper cut through the dark, "You don't sleep either, huh?" Her eyes shifted. A figure stirred on the bunk across from her, Private Lee. Young, too young. Barely 20, face soft despite the uniform. He pushed himself up on his elbows, squinting. "You're Anna, right?" She nodded once. He probably knew her name already, but saying it out loud was his way of breaking the barrier. He rubbed his face. "Can't shut it off either. My old man used to say, war's not loud until it's in your head." He was right. His voice cracked, but he forced a grin. She didn't answer, just watched him, the way his hands shook as he pulled a small photo from under his pillow. He held it up, though the light was barely enough. "My sister, she just turned 16, keeps telling me she hates school. Can you imagine?" His laugh was small, brittle. "I told her if I make it back, she doesn't get to complain anymore. She has to live the boring life. That's her job." The grin faded as quick as it came. He tucked the photo away, eyes dropping. "I don't know why I told you that. Sorry." Her chest tightened. Not for him, though maybe a little, but because she remembered doing the same thing. Sitting across from her brother in silence until he cracked a joke just to keep fear from drowning them both. She whispered, voice low, "Don't apologize." He looked at her again, not like the others, not like she was invisible, just human. And for a moment, that was almost worse. The night stretched thin. Rain eased outside, leaving only the sound of dripping water against metal gutters. Somewhere, a generator hummed. When dawn broke, it came gray and heavy. Clouds pressed low, promising more rain. The air was thick with damp earth, boots stomping, engines roaring to life. The mission day. She moved through the hangar in silence. Men strapped vests, loaded magazines, checked rifles. Cigarette smoke curled near the open doors. Someone muttered a prayer under his breath. Another kissed a ring tied around his neck. All of them had their rituals, small anchors against the storm they were about to step into. She checked her rifle, adjusted the strap, slid her scope into place. The steel felt cold against her skin, almost comforting. Machines didn't doubt, machines didn't ignore. They did exactly what you asked of them. "Sniper details secondary," the colonel barked. "Eyes on Alpha's movement. Hold positions until ordered." She nodded with the others, but inside her chest, fire burned. Secondary, always secondary, until they needed you. The convoy rolled out. Engines growled against wet earth. Tires splashed mud. She sat in the back, rifle across her knees, the world passing by in muted gray. Fields blurred. Hills rose dark and heavy against the horizon. The ridge lay ahead, quiet, waiting. Men joked in the truck, forced laughter. She heard fragments. Get a beer after this. If the rain doesn't drown us first. Johnson's got the lead. He always comes back. Johnson, she glanced at him. He sat across, jaw set, eyes forward. A scar ran down his cheek, deeper in the morning light. He noticed her glance, met her eyes for a beat, then looked away. No words, just that silent exchange. Enough to tell her he felt it too. The weight, the wrongness. The convoy slowed. Tires crunched gravel, orders barked. Alpha dismount. Boots hit dirt. Rifles slung forward. Men moved with a practiced rhythm, though tension threaded every step. She climbed out, mud sucking at her boots. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of wet grass and diesel. She adjusted her rifle, eyes scanning the ridge. Nothing too quiet. She moved with the sniper team, peeling off toward higher ground. Each step up the hill pulled her chest tighter. She kept her gaze locked, searching for shadows. Birds, just birds, trees swayed with wind. But then movement. Small, precise, too still to be nature. Her scope caught it, the curve of a helmet, the glint of metal. Her stomach dropped. They were already there, waiting. She pressed her radio. Alpha hold, ridges occupied, ambush position. Static crackled, then the colonel's voice, negative, continue as ordered. Her pulse pounded. She pressed again. Sir, I have eyes. Continue as ordered. Silence after. Her breath hitched. Around her the sniper team glanced her way, uneasy. One muttered, you sure? She didn't answer, didn't need to. She saw it plain as day. Below, Alpha moved forward, Johnson in the lead. Lee too rose back. She aimed down, scope again, heart hammering. The ridge brimmed with danger, fingers on triggers, muzzles glinting. She whispered to herself, don't you see it, don't you feel it? But they didn't. Her brother's voice echoed in memory. Sometimes you don't ask, you act. She exhaled, slow. The trigger under her finger felt cold, alive. And for the first time she realized authority wasn't given, it was taken. What she did next would decide who lived and who never made it back. How long could she hold her breath before the world collapsed? Her cheek pressed against the rifle stock, scope locked on the ridge. Shapes moved in the shadows, steady, patient, waiting. She could see the curve of rifles resting on rocks, barrels already aimed down at Alpha. Below, Johnson raised a fist. The squad froze, scanning the valley. They felt it. Even if they didn't see what she saw, instinct was scratching at their skin. Her radio crackled again. Alpha advance, the colonel's voice, hard, unyielding. She bit the inside of her cheek. Blood touched her tongue. Advance meant slaughter. She looked through her scope again, crosshairs resting on the nearest shadow. A man's helmet. A slight shift of shoulders as he leaned into his weapon. She could end him before he drew breath, but the shot would break silence. It would mean all-out fire. It would mean exposing herself, acting without command. Her finger trembled on the trigger. Not fear, not hesitation, just the weight of what came after. Alpha, move. Johnson hesitated below, just for a second. His scar caught the gray light, his jaw clenched, and then he lifted his hand and signaled forward. Her heart lurched. No. She whispered, don't do it. But they did, boots crunching gravel, men shifting rifles higher, advancing one step at a time toward the hollow. And in that step she decided. Her finger squeezed. The crack of her rifle shattered the valley. Birds exploded from the trees. Echoes rolled like thunder. The man on the ridge jerked back, helmet snapping, body slumping out of sight. Silence lasted only a second, then hell opened. Gunfire erupted, deafening, cascading down from the ridge. Dirt sprayed. Men shouted. Alpha dropped, scrambling for cover. Johnson dove behind a rock, yelling orders. Her radio screeched with the colonel's voice. Who fired? Who the hell fired? She ignored it, scanned, fired again. Another target down. The sniper team around her hesitated, caught between obedience and survival. One cursed under his breath. Then he fired too. Another shot rang out. That was all it took. They followed her lead. Below, Alpha scrambled but lived. Because the first bullet hadn't been theirs. Because someone had broken silence before the ridge could unleash. Her breath came sharp, steady. Rifle cracked again and again. Shadows dropped one by one. Through the chaos, her gaze flicked to Johnson. He looked up, eyes locking with hers across the valley. And in that glance he knew. She had saved them. But the radio roared. The colonel's voice furious. Cease fire, cease, God damn it, you're disobeying a direct order. She pressed the radio voice flat, controlled. Ambush confirmed. Ridge compromised. Alpha under heavy fire. Static, then silence. For the first time, he didn't answer. She fired again. Another man dropped. Her pulse steadied, breaths measured. This was what she was made for, not the silence of being ignored, but the sharp clarity of action. Minutes stretched, fire echoed. The ridge fought hard, but surprise had shifted. Alpha wasn't walking blind anymore. They had cover, returned fire, a chance. And when the last echo faded, the valley was still. Smoke drifted. Spent casings littered the ground like brass rain. Johnson rose first, helmet tilted back, eyes scanning the ridge. Then he lifted a hand, not a salute, not a command, just a small nod. Respect. Her chest tightened. But the radio crackled again. Return to base now. The colonel's voice was ice. The convoy back was silent. Mud splashed under tires. Men sat stiff, rifles heavy across laps. No jokes now, no brittle laughter, just the weight of what had almost happened. Lee sat near her, his face pale, jaw working. His hand trembled against his rifle until he clenched it still. He glanced her way once, opened his mouth, then closed it. Words failed, but his eyes didn't. They said everything: fear, gratitude, disbelief. She looked away, out the flap at the gray blur of trees. At base, they dismounted in silence. The colonel stood waiting near the hangar, hands clasped behind his back, jaw tight enough to break. Inside now. The men filed past him, avoiding his gaze. She walked last, rifle still slung, boots heavy with mud. Inside the office, the door shut behind her like a verdict. The colonel didn't sit. He paced once, then stopped, facing her. You disobeyed a direct order. She stood straight, unflinching. I prevented a massacre. His eyes narrowed. You undermined command in the field. You jeopardized discipline. Do you understand what that means? Her voice was quiet. It means they're alive. The silence between them was thick, sharp. Rain ticked against the window. Finally he spoke. You think authority is a rifle, point, fire, done. He shook his head. Authority is trust, and you broke it. Her jaw clenched. She wanted to scream, to tell him trust wasn't blind obedience. That trust was earned when men came home alive, but she bit it back. He studied her for a long moment. Dismissed. We'll discuss consequences later. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. One more thing. Don't mistake survival for victory. It won't save you. She walked out without answering. That night the barracks was quieter than usual. Men shifted in bunks, whispers low, glances sharper. She sat on her bunk, rifle beside her, hands clasped around the tag at her neck. Lee approached, hesitant. He held something out, half of an energy bar. Figured you didn't eat. She looked at it, then at him. He shrugged, almost shy. If you hadn't pulled that trigger, we wouldn't be here. I know it. They might not say it, but I do. Her throat tightened. She took it, broke off a piece, handed the rest back. He smiled faintly, sat across from her. "Why'd you do it? Risk it." She looked down at the tag in her hand. The engraved name, the weight of silence. She didn't answer, not fully, just whispered, "Because I knew what came next." He nodded slowly, as if that was enough. The silence stretched between them, not heavy, not empty, just shared. And for the first time since she carried her brother's tag, she didn't feel entirely alone. But in the colonel's office, the phone rang. His voice was low when he answered. "Yes, sir," she fired first. "No authorization." Pause. Yes, she saved them, but at what cost to command? Silence, a longer pause. Then his tone hardened. "Understood." He hung up, jaw tight, eyes narrowing. Whatever came next, it wasn't over. And she had no idea what storm was already waiting for her. The storm broke 3 days later. In those days, the base wore silence like armor. Men drilled, weapons were cleaned, patrols rotated, but laughter, the crude banter that filled empty hours, vanished. Eyes cut sideways at her, not with anger but with something quieter, something heavier. Respect carried its own weight. She kept to herself. Dawn runs, weapon checks, drills until sweat blurred her vision. Nights were worst, lying in her bunk, staring at the ceiling while the rain drummed the tin roof, hearing her brother's voice in memory. "Sometimes you've got to move before the order comes, sis, or the order never comes at all." She thought she understood those words. Now she felt their cost. The colonel avoided her. No summons, no reprimand, no official word. But the silence was worse. A blade left hanging above her head, waiting. It fell on the fourth morning. The barracks door slammed open. Gear up, formation. Boots hit floors, straps tightened, rifles slung. Men filed out into the gray dawn, mist curling off wet ground. She moved with them, expression flat, shoulders set. The colonel stood waiting in the yard. His face was stone, voice sharper than the chill air. "Line up." They did, a dozen soldiers in mud-stained fatigues. Alpha stood beside her now, scarred and hollow-eyed but alive. Johnson at their head, posture iron. The colonel's gaze swept the line, then locked on her. "Step forward." Her boots struck wet gravel. She stopped 2 paces ahead, rifle slung tight against her chest. "You broke the chain of command," the colonel said, his voice carrying across the yard. "You endangered cohesion, and you acted without authorization." A pause, rain ticked off his cap brim. "And because of it," he said, "Alpha Squad lives." A ripple moved through the formation. Men shifted, glancing at one another. The colonel's eyes narrowed. "Do not mistake survival for justification. If every soldier chose when to fire, we'd drown in chaos. The battlefield is not made for individuals. It's made for discipline." Her throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "With respect, sir, discipline without judgment is a graveyard. They were walking blind into an ambush. I acted." His jaw clenched. "And if you'd been wrong?" She didn't flinch. "Then I'd take the weight of it." Silence, rain hissed in the gravel. The colonel's stare held hers for a long moment. Then he spoke louder. "From this moment, you are stripped from forward command. Your rifle is reassigned to reserves. You will serve under direct supervision until further notice." Her chest went cold. The rifle slung against her suddenly felt like ash. Behind her, the formation stirred, uneasy, almost restless. Johnson's scar caught the dim light as his jaw tightened. He didn't move, but his silence spoke louder than protest. The colonel's gaze flicked across the squad. Dismissed. Boots shifted. Soldiers filed out. But as she turned to go, Johnson's eyes met hers. There was no pity there, only recognition. And in that silence, she knew, the colonel might strip her of orders, but he couldn't strip what the men had already decided. Life under restriction was suffocating. Her rifle taken, her spot on the ridge reassigned. Instead, she sorted gear, checked ammo crates, ran drills that belonged to rookies. The colonel didn't speak to her again, but his eyes followed, always watching, always measuring. The men spoke less around her, not because they blamed her, because they didn't know what words fit. Until one night in the mess hall. Rain hammered the roof. The generator hummed. Men hunched over tin trays, voices low. She sat alone at the end of the table, pushing cold beans with a fork. Johnson stood, scarred face, heavy presence. He crossed the room, sat across from her. The hall quieted. He leaned forward, voice low but steady. You saw what we didn't. You acted when we couldn't. That doesn't get erased because someone's scared of what it means. Her hand stilled on the fork. He held her gaze. You saved my squad. You saved me. That's not discipline. That's leadership. A murmur rippled through the room. Men glanced over, pretending not to listen. She shook her head, voice flat. Leadership gets you crushed under the weight of orders. You know it. Johnson's scar twisted with a faint smile. Maybe, but sometimes it gets you through the fire too. For the first time in days, her chest eased. She didn't smile back, but she didn't look away either. Weeks blurred. Missions rotated. The Valley ambush faded from official reports, erased under the weight of paperwork. But in the mud, in the rain, in the silences between firefights, the story spread. It grew quiet, unspoken, but it lived. A single act carried like smoke. She fired first. She saved them. The colonel tightened his grip. Orders grew harsher. Patrols doubled. Drills cut sharper. But the harder his fist closed, the more the soldiers glanced her way in silence. Until the night the perimeter lit up. Alarms blared, floodlights snapped to life. The base shook under incoming mortar fire. Dirt erupted in plumes, sirens wailed. Men scrambled from bunks, half-dressed, weapons in hand. The colonel's voice roared over the comms, orders cutting sharp through chaos. She ran with the rest, boots slamming mud. But where others faltered, she moved clean, instinct guiding her, not waiting, not hesitating. A shell landed near the east wall. The earth shook. Men scattered. Lee froze, wide-eyed, staring at the plume. She grabbed his arm, yanking him forward just as another round screamed overhead. Move. They dove behind cover, dirt showering over them. Her heart pounded, but her eyes were steady. She scanned the ridge through the chaos and saw it. Shadows in the floodlight glare. The enemy wasn't probing. They were coming. Not one squad, not a strike team, an entire company. And the base wasn't ready. She grabbed Lee's shoulder, shouting over the din. Tell Johnson they're flanking east. Move now. He hesitated, but the colonel. Now. He saw her eyes, and he ran. Seconds later, Johnson's voice roared across the yard, cutting over panic. East wall, cover now. Men shifted, rifles swinging, positions adjusting. Fire opened where it mattered. And the attack slowed. The colonel's orders came seconds too late, echoing what had already been done. Through smoke and thunder, she saw it in the men's faces, clarity. Not blind discipline, not hesitation, just trust in action. Hours later, when the last mortar fell silent and the last shadow slipped back into the trees, the base stood, shaken, bloodied, but standing. The colonel strode across the yard, mud up to his knees, face carved in fury. His eyes locked on her. Inside now. The men froze, watching. Johnson's jaw tightened. Lee stepped closer, fists clenched. But she didn't resist, didn't speak, just walked into the storm, waiting inside the colonel's office. The door slammed. The colonel leaned forward across the desk, voice like a knife. You think you can run my command. You think you can make decisions above your rank. She stood straight, mud-streaked, eyes burning but calm. No, she said softly. I think I can save lives when you're too late. Silence. His jaw worked, his fist slammed the desk. You're finished. But outside, the men stood in the mud, listening through thin walls, and they already knew it wasn't true. Because she wasn't finished. She was just beginning. Why did the silence feel heavier than the shells? After the attack, the base didn't settle. Not really. Men walked the yard with tighter shoulders. Laughter was gone again, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was out of waiting. Waiting for what she would do. She carried the weight of it like a shadow. Each step she took, eyes followed. Not openly, not in salute, but in silence, in glances, in the way conversation stalled when she passed. The colonel felt it too. His voice sharpened in briefings. His orders grew faster, harsher, as if the war outside wasn't half the battle compared to the one inside his own walls. And still she said nothing. Not yet. That night Johnson came to her. The barracks were quiet. Rain leaked through a crack in the roof, tapping a rhythm on the floor between bunks. She sat cleaning her sidearm, though she hadn't been issued a mission in weeks. Habit kept her hands busy, even when her heart weighed heavy. Johnson slid onto the bunk opposite. His scar caught the dim bulb light, his voice low. "He knows the men are with you," he said. Her hands stilled, she looked up slowly. "I don't want them with me." "That's the problem," Johnson said. "They've already decided." She swallowed hard. Decided what? That when orders come too slow, when the wrong call's made, they'll move with you instead. The words cut through the silence like a blade. She set the pistol aside, her voice brittle. "That's mutiny." Johnson's gaze didn't flinch. "That's survival." Her breath caught. She thought of her brother, of the tag pressed against her skin. He would have hated this. Or maybe he would have understood. She whispered, almost to herself, "This isn't what I wanted." "No one ever wants it," Johnson said. "But sometimes wanting doesn't matter." The next mission came 2 days later. The colonel called for a night patrol into the valley, the same valley where Alpha had nearly died. His voice cut sharp as he laid it out. "Recon only, no engagement, eyes on movement, report back." But something in the air felt wrong. She saw it in the colonel's eyes, the way his jaw shifted when he spoke. A bad mission, a trap, she felt it in her bones. And when the roster was read, her name wasn't there. Johnson's was, Lee's was, Alpha Squad again, patched together, scarred but still standing. Her chest burned. She didn't speak, didn't protest. She just stood in silence as the men geared up. But when Johnson passed her, rifle slung over his shoulder, his hand brushed hers, quick, hidden. Trust unspoken. She wanted to scream, to beg him not to go, but the words never left her throat. The patrol left under clouded moonlight. Hours stretched. She sat in the mess, untouched rations cooling in front of her. The clock ticked loud, each second heavier than the last. When the first gunfire cracked across the valley, her heart slammed against her ribs. Shouts echoed over the comms, sharp, panicked. She grabbed the radio on instinct. "Alpha, report." Static, then a voice, ragged, breaking. "Contact North Ridge, multiple Johnsons hit." Her blood froze. The colonel's voice cut in, calm and sharp. "Hold position, reinforcements in 20. 20. Her hands clenched the radio. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 years. She could hear it through the static, the fire, the shouting, the chaos. She stood. Boots struck the floor. She moved fast, gear snapping into place. Sidearm, knife, borrowed rifle from the rack. A guard at the door stepped forward, alarm flashing in his eyes. "You're not cleared." She didn't break stride. Her shoulder hit his, sending him stumbling. And she was gone. The valley was a mouth of fire. Rounds snapped through the trees. Smoke curled in the moonlight. Men shouted through gritted teeth. She dropped low, sliding behind a shattered log, eyes scanning. Alpha Squad, pinned down, pressed against a ridge. Johnson lay sprawled, blood dark against his sleeve, teeth bared in pain. Lee crouched over him, firing blind, panic sharp in his face. She raised the rifle, breath steady. 1, 2, 3 shadows fell in silence. Heads whipped toward her. Lee's eyes widened, relief flooding his face. She moved fast, sliding down beside them. Her hands pressed to Johnson's arm, steady despite the chaos. "Hold pressure. Don't move." Johnson's voice was gravel. "You shouldn't be here." She met his eyes steady. "Neither should you." Then she turned, rifle swinging, covering the squad. Each shot was measured, controlled. Not desperation, not panic, just clarity. And slowly, painfully, the tide shifted. When reinforcements arrived, they found Alpha alive. Shaken, bloodied, but alive. And they found her, rifle in hand, leading. Back at the base, the colonel's fury was a storm. His office shook with it, papers slammed, his fist struck the desk. "You defied me again," he roared. "You disobeyed direct orders again. You put yourself where you had no clearance again." Her voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut. "And if I hadn't, Johnson would be dead." His teeth bared. If every soldier thought they knew better, this unit would collapse. Her voice didn't rise, but it didn't break either. Maybe it already has. The words hung heavy, thick in the air. The colonel's face went pale with rage, but beneath it she saw it, a flicker, a crack in his armor. Because he knew. He knew the men were watching. He knew whose silence they carried, whose lead they followed when it mattered. And he knew he was losing them. That night she sat outside the barracks, rain soft against her face. Her hands shook when she finally pulled the dog tag from her collar. Her brother's name glinted in the dim light. She whispered into the night, voice raw. "I didn't come here to lead. I came because I couldn't let you vanish into silence. And now." Her throat closed. She pressed the tag to her lips. "I don't know if I'm becoming what I should, or what I shouldn't." Footsteps crunched behind her. Johnson's voice, low but steady. "You're becoming what we need." She turned. He stood there, arm bandaged, face pale but eyes fierce. And in that moment she realized this wasn't about permission. It wasn't about rank. It was about responsibility. And responsibility doesn't wait for orders. It just moves. The next morning, when the men formed up for briefing, something subtle had shifted. The colonel barked orders, sharp as always, but the soldiers' eyes weren't locked on him anymore. They were on her. And the colonel saw it. For the first time, his voice faltered. The war outside raged on. Missions loomed. But inside those thin tin walls, a different war had already begun. And she, silent, steady, unwilling, had become its center. The weight pressed heavy, but for the first time she didn't shrink under it. She stood taller. Because sometimes authority isn't given. It's taken. And once it's taken, it changes everything. Why did the air feel thinner when the colonel entered the room? The briefing tent was packed, sweat and damp uniforms pressed shoulder to shoulder. Maps stretched across the table, pins stabbing valleys, ridges, and rivers like wounds. The colonel's voice carved through the heat. "Intel confirms enemy supply lines east of the river. Objective, intercept convoy, disable bridge. Time frame, 72 hours. His finger jabbed the map. "This is a surgical strike, minimal contact. Execution depends on timing, not improvisation. Understood." Nods rippled around the table. Pens scratched notes. But she stood in the corner, silent, arms crossed, eyes burning holes into the map. Because she knew something he hadn't said. The valley wasn't empty anymore. Recon from her own eyes. The night she'd run into the trees, hunting her way back after Alpha's patrol, told her the ridge above the bridge was crawling with sentries. The colonel's intel was wrong, fatally wrong. But when she shifted, when she opened her mouth, his glare cut across the tent. "You're not on this op." The words landed like a gavel. And that was it. She bit her tongue. The soldiers filed out, boots stomped mud. But one pair lingered, Johnson's. He brushed past her, low voice catching only her ear. "Then we go in blind." Her jaw clenched. She didn't answer, she didn't need to. Later in the armory, the silence broke. Lee stood by the racks, strapping gear tension sharp in his shoulders. "You saw the ridge, didn't you?" he asked, not looking up. Her heart beat faster. "Yeah." "And he doesn't know." "No." Lee's laugh was bitter, jagged. "So we walk in half blind and what? Hope luck's on our side." She didn't speak, didn't move. Because the truth was already clear. Johnson's voice cut in steady. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, scar catching dim light. "Luck, not the plan, she is." Lee froze. "You're saying we follow her?" Johnson's eyes stayed on her. "I'm saying when it breaks wrong, and it will, we'll need someone who sees what he doesn't." Lee looked between them, disbelief flickering with fear. "That's mutiny." Johnson's voice stayed calm. "No, that's survival." Her chest tightened. The word looped, echoing from weeks ago. Survival, the justification no one wanted to admit out loud. She shook her head, whispering more to herself than to them. "If you follow me, you'll burn with me." Johnson's answer was simple. "Then we burn together." The mission moved at dawn. The convoy rumbled through the valley, armored trucks grinding over mud. Alpha Squad moved along the ridge, rifles low, boots crunching frost. The colonel's orders whispered through the comms. "Hold until contact, eyes only, wait for signal." She crouched low, breath slow, eyes scanning the ridge ahead. And there they were, silhouettes in the gray, rifles glinting faintly, sentries tucked against the rocks. Her stomach dropped. The colonel hadn't seen them. The convoy roared louder. Men crouched lower, tension coiled like a live wire. She whispered into the comm, low and sharp. "Ridges crawling, at least a dozen, ambush position." Static, then the colonel's voice clipped. "Negative, no movement confirmed." Her blood boiled. She pressed the mic harder. "I'm looking right at them. You put us in their teeth." "Hold position," he barked. "That's an order." The sentries shifted, rifles lifting. Shadows stirred above. The trap was closing. Her finger trembled on the trigger. Sweat chilled her skin. Johnson's voice cracked through the silence. "Call it." Time slowed. Her brother's voice echoed in her chest. "Sometimes you've got to move before the order comes, sis, or the order never comes at all." Her jaw clenched, breath locked. And then her shot split the dawn. One shadow fell, then another. The ridge erupted in fire. Alpha Squad scattered, rifles swinging, rounds snapping through air. Explosions tore earth. The convoy veered, trucks fishtailing. The colonel's voice roared in her ear, fury raw. "What the hell are you doing?" She ducked behind stone, reloading fast, voice sharp. "Saving them." Bullets ricocheted. Dirt kicked her face. She pressed low, then swung out. 1, 2, 3 sentries down in clean bursts. Alpha moved with her, not the comm. Johnson covering left, Lee dragging a rookie out of open ground. The squad flowed where she pointed, instinct replacing hesitation. And slowly, painfully, they held. When the last shadow fell, when the convoy limped but intact across the bridge, silence rolled in heavy. Her chest heaved, smoke stung her lungs. The comm crackled again. The colonel's voice was low this time, cold. "Return to base immediately." The march back was suffocating. No one spoke. Mud sucked at boots. The valley mist pressed close. But glances flickered, soldiers looking at her, not the colonel, silent choices already made. Back at the base, she was pulled into the colonel's office before she could even strip her gear. The door slammed. He loomed over the desk, fury trembling in his fists. "You undermined me in front of the entire squad," he spat. "You broke chain of command in the middle of an op." Her voice stayed even, though her pulse thundered. "And if I hadn't, we'd be carrying bodies back instead of intel." His face twisted. "You think you're a savior, you're a liability, you're poison in this unit." The words stung. She felt them hit, but she didn't let it show. Because she'd seen the looks. Because poison doesn't keep men alive. He leaned closer, voice low, venomous. "If you ever pull this again, I'll bury your career so deep no one remembers your name." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to lash back, but instead she whispered, steady, quiet, cutting. "My name doesn't matter." She touched the chain at her collar, her brother's tag cool against her skin. "There's due." The silence after was colder than the rain outside. That night she sat alone by the fence, the valley stretching black and endless beyond. Her hands shook as she lit a cigarette she didn't even want. The smoke curled, bitter on her tongue. She thought of her brother, of his laugh, his rough advice, the way he'd shielded her from storms when they were kids. And she thought of the men now, Johnson's steady faith, Lee's fear turned trust, the rookies clinging to a belief she hadn't asked for. Her chest ached, not pride, not fear, something heavier. Responsibility. Footsteps crunched behind her. Johnson again, voice rough but softer than the night. "You didn't just call the shot today," he said. "You drew the line." She didn't turn, and now we choose which side we're on. She blew smoke into the dark, voice hollow. "That's mutiny." Johnson's hand touched her shoulder, firm. "No, that's survival, and maybe it's the only way we win." The words sank deep. She wanted to reject them, wanted to shove them away. But deep down she knew something had shifted today. Not just in the valley, not just on the ridge. In the men, in her. And once a line is drawn, it never truly fades. When dawn broke, the colonel barked another briefing, another mission, another order. But this time, when his voice cut the air, the men's eyes didn't lock on him anymore. They locked on her. And she felt it, like a weight, like a fire, like a truth she couldn't run from. Authority wasn't given, it wasn't stripped. It was chosen. And whether she wanted it or not, they had chosen her. The rotor wash beat against the night as the helicopter lifted away, carrying the wounded toward a horizon she could not follow. Anna stood in the field, rifle still slung across her chest, mud gripping her boots, breath coming in hard pulls. The mission wasn't over, not yet, but a piece of her had gone with that bird. Why did it feel like every time she reached for something, someone, it slipped through her hands? She shook the thought off. The world didn't care about her grief, and neither did the war. Somewhere beyond the tree line, the enemy regrouped. They knew she was still here. They knew she wasn't finished. The squad regrouped around her, faces streaked with dirt and smoke, eyes that searched hers not for comfort but for a decision. That was the strange weight she carried now. Authority, not handed down, not written on paper, earned in silence, in the way she stood when others broke. Cortez was the first to speak. His voice cracked, rough from smoke inhalation. "We can't hold this line much longer. Ammo's low. We've got one shot at pushing through before they box us in." Anna nodded but said nothing. Her mind was elsewhere, running 2 steps ahead, calculating the cost, the weight of every bullet, every choice. And underneath it all, a memory, her brother's laugh in the barracks, the way he had carried the weight so effortlessly. He'd always been the one others turned to. Now somehow it was her. She closed her eyes for one breath. When she opened them, the squad was waiting, expectant, afraid, hopeful. Her voice was calm, too calm. "We don't hold the line." They stared. Cortez frowned. "Then what? Fall back, run." Anna's gaze was sharp, unwavering. "We move through it, hard and fast, before they know we're gone." A murmur spread. Someone cursed under their breath. But no one argued. Something in her tone, something in the way she stood in the mud, rifle across her chest, unblinking against the storm, it silenced them. And so they moved. The forest closed in around them. Every branch cracked like a warning. Every step carried the risk of being the last. She led point, her senses sharpened, her body running on the thin thread between exhaustion and instinct. Behind her the squad followed, one by one, breathing her silence, trusting her steps. But the silence broke. Gunfire ripped from the left flank. Shouts. Bark splintered off trees near her head. She dropped to the ground, motioning the squad down. The world became chaos, flashes of muzzle fire, the acrid burn of powder, the metallic scream of ricochets. Her finger pressed to the trigger, sight aligning with shadows between trees. One breath, one squeeze, a shape crumpled, another shot, another fall. Her heart pounded, but her mind stayed cold, detached. Each target wasn't a man, not a face, just a shape standing between her and the survival of the people who followed her. The squad pushed forward under her lead. They broke through the ambush line, leaving silence and smoke behind. And when it was over, when the gunfire faded and the forest returned to its whisper, they looked at her differently. Not just as another soldier, not as a woman in their ranks, but as the reason they were still alive. Cortez caught her eye. For the first time, his voice carried something softer. They thought you wouldn't move, that you'd stay quiet. Guess they were wrong. Anna didn't answer, didn't smile. She only adjusted the rifle against her chest and kept walking, because something in her told her the worst was still waiting. And she was right. Because what none of them knew, what she hadn't told them, was that the mission wasn't about holding ground. It wasn't about the ambush or the extraction or survival. It was about one name. One man hidden deep beyond enemy lines. The one who had ordered her brother's death. And she wasn't leaving until she found him. The night felt heavier than the day had. Not because of the rain. It had slowed to a thin drizzle, whispering through the broken trees. Not because of the silence, though even the crickets seemed to know better than to break it. It was heavy because everything had led to this. Anna knelt in the mud, her rifle steady against her shoulder, her eye fixed on the darkened outpost ahead. The faint glow of lanterns marked the enemy compound. 2 guards stood at the gate, shifting their weight as if trying to convince themselves they weren't afraid. Inside, buried under layers of steel and walls, was the man she had come for. The man who had signed her brother's death, with nothing more than ink and arrogance. Her squad waited behind her, breaths shallow, weapons ready, nerves raw. They had followed her this far, through fire and mud, through nights that felt endless. They didn't ask why. They didn't know the name that burned in her chest like a coal she refused to let die. But Cortez did. He crouched beside her, whispering low, "If we go in, we're not all coming out, you know that." She didn't look at him. Her finger traced the dog tag hidden beneath her uniform. "I know." "Then tell me, why is it worth it?" Her throat tightened. For a moment she almost couldn't answer. But then the words came, quiet, almost too soft to hear. "Because some things don't end until you stand in front of them." Cortez studied her for a moment, then nodded. No more questions, no more hesitation. He would follow, they all would. The plan unfolded in whispers. 2 would cut the power. 1 would plant charges along the outer fence. The rest would follow her lead. Simple, clean, at least on paper. But war never honored paper. The lights flickered out. The outpost plunged into darkness, and with it, the world held its breath. They moved, shadows slipping into deeper shadows, boots soft against wet soil, a hand signal here, a sharp nod there. Anna's pulse drummed in her ears, but her hands were steady, always steady. The first guard fell without a sound. The second almost screamed, but her blade silenced him before the thought could leave his throat. They breached the gate, crossed into the compound. The squad fanned out, sweeping corridors, clearing rooms. Whispers turned to bursts of gunfire, muffled cries, then silence again, always silence again. Until only one door remained. Steel reinforced, locked from within. Anna stood before it, her breath shallow, her hand tightening on the rifle grip. This was it, the end of the long road, the moment she had built her silence around. Her squad stacked behind her, Cortez at her shoulder. "On you," he whispered. She nodded. The charges blew. The door screamed open in a storm of smoke and shrapnel. They stormed inside. And there he was. Not the monster she had built in her head, not the shadow that haunted her sleepless nights, just a man, older, tired, papers scattered on the table before him, a pistol in his hand that shook more than it threatened. His eyes widened when he saw her. Recognition, fear, something else. "You," he breathed. Her rifle didn't waver, not an inch. For a moment the world narrowed to two heartbeats, hers, his. She thought of her brother, his laugh, his hand on her shoulder the day he left, the way his absence had carved a hollow she could never fill. She thought of the squad behind her, the men who had trusted her silence, followed her into fire. She thought of the dog tag pressing cold against her skin. Her finger brushed the trigger. And then she stopped. The man lowered his pistol, confusion flickering in his gaze. Why don't you?" Anna's voice was barely above a whisper. "Because killing you won't give him back." Her rifle lowered, slowly, deliberately. Behind her the squad shifted uneasily. They didn't understand. Maybe they never would. But she did. She had carried the weight of vengeance across mud and fire. And in this room, in this single fragile moment, she finally understood it. Vengeance wasn't the answer. It was the chain, and letting it go was the only way to walk free. She turned away. "We're done here." Cortez caught her eye. He didn't argue, he just nodded once. Solid, respectful. The squad pulled back, leaving the man alive in his own silence. Outside, dawn broke. Pale light stretched across the tree line, soft against the ruins of the night. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. Anna stood in it, the rifle hanging loose at her side, the weight of her brother's dog tag still against her chest. For the first time in years, she felt something that wasn't rage. It wasn't peace. Not yet, but it was the beginning of it. Cortez stepped beside her. "So what now?" She looked toward the horizon, toward the sun rising slow and stubborn. "Now we live, because that's what he wanted." The squad fell into step behind her. No words, no cheers, just silence. And maybe that was enough. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. Sometimes dignity simply acts. And in that silence, it changes everything.